Colorado lawmakers are back at work. They kicked off the 2021 legislative session today.
And the plan is to meet just for a few days this month and then get back to the normal workload in February.
Tonight, Denver 7 political reporter Megan Lopez is taking a 360 look at some of the competing priorities right now.
Because I know we can get through this if we all hold tough.
If the 2020 legislative session was unusual, the 2021 session is sure to be downright strange. It's starting with 3 days of housekeeping, followed by a month-long recess, then the real work resumes. Along with combating COVID, lawmakers will focus on reviving the economy and their own legislative agendas. In this Denver 7 360, you'll hear from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, an educator, a health policy expert, and CDOT about their priorities this legislative session. For Democrats,
clearly the 2020 session was very disrupted by the emergence of COVID-19.
Much of this year will be about reviving a crippled economy.
A lot of bills come back that are very focused on small business recovery, very focused on the low-wage workers who have been disproportionately impacted.
Their exact priorities will be unveiled closer to the February restart, but in general,
you're going to continue to see us focus on mental health, substance abuse.
Healthcare costs are too high. People continue to worry about our aging infrastructure.
Supporting our K-12 system and higher education and funding.
For Republicans,
a lot of times in the minority, it's responding to what big ideas are coming from the majority, but we have some really good ideas here too.
COVID response also tops the priority list.
That bill fails on a vote of...
including some bills that were shot down during the special session.
We want to make sure that wait staff, that those people who depend on gratuities for their income, don't have to pay income tax on those gratuities during this time.
Minority Leader Hugh McKean says a big question on his mind will be,
where's the money going to come from?
And he's hesitant to put more regulations on oil and gas or other industries that are already struggling.
We need to find out what the last groundbreaking legislation is going to do and how it's going to move through the economy.
If there's one thing the COVID pandemic did,
it's really highlighted a lot of the gaps in our health system.
It served as a reminder of the importance of health. During the 2020 legislative session, dozens of bills focused on healthcare, from medication transparency to consumer protections.
There was a lot of disappointment about some of those bills getting sidelined because of the pandemic.
Adam Fox from the Colorado Consumer Health Initiative has two things he'd like lawmakers to focus on this year. First,
controlling prescription drug costs for Coloradans, both in their out-of-pocket costs, but also the cost to our healthcare system.
Second, a new version of the public option that died last session.
Public health insurance option has the opportunity to create more affordable coverage for Coloradans. And
we had major needs for our students, as well as our educators.
The pandemic has also highlighted the needs of schools. The Colorado Education Association's legislative priorities can be summed up in one word:
funding. We are woefully underfunded in public education here in Colorado.
CEA President Amy Baca-Ohlert would like to see lawmakers focus more resources to help with class sizes, mental health, and to address the digital divide.
We've had many of our students that have what's called the homework gap, because when they leave our schools during the day, they don't have the access to the technology.
So they're hoping lawmakers will support schools. CDOT,
there's a very timely question of stimulus,
has a similar focus on funding in the immediate future.
That included proposing about $200 million in transportation funds.
But also moving forward.
First, we look forward to working with legislators of both parties to tackle the kind of perennial question of whether there's a way to sort of fund transportation sustainably.
They're concentrated on building and repairing infrastructure, yes, but the COVID pandemic has brought out another need to help communities use streets for outdoor dining to keep businesses alive.
Really doubling down on these investments in Main Street to make sure that we have a kind of concerted focus on helping communities across the state.
Something else on their legislative wish list?
Increasing the size limit on simple projects that CDOT can do by ourselves with our maintenance forces.
So they can streamline simple repairs, particularly in rural areas. Normally, the start of the legislative session is full of pomp and circumstance. This year, lawmakers are skipping much of that to get straight to work. With so many struggling, what this year's priorities should be depends on who you ask. Megan Lopez, Denver 7.
Okay, so it's your turn. We want to know what you think. What issues do you think should be a priority for lawmakers this session? Email us 360@thedenverchannel.com.